She could have been anybody's grandmother.
No indication whatsoever that anyone would have any kind of ill will directed at her.
But she ended up beaten to death in her own bathtub. And a friendly neighborhood became a hotbed of suspicion and fear.
People were very, very scared in that town that this could happen to them.
So how did the attacker get in the house?
There was no way to secure the residence, that there was ongoing construction.
Stanley Gendreau kidnapped a teenage girl and beat her to death.
So did you feel like he was telling the truth?
The court actually imposed, as a part of their parole, could never come back to the town of Little Compton. We had no clear suspects identified within the first 3 to 4 days.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Expose takes us to Little Compton, Rhode Island. When you think of this New England shoreline, you might think of miles of rocky beaches dotted with picturesque villages or close-knit communities famous for fresh air and relaxation, but not blood and death.
Little Compton is one of these towns, perched on the Atlantic coast. A nice place to live. But late one spring, the people of Little Compton found out that evil has no boundaries. One Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, Angela Spence Shaw failed to report for work at the local nursery. So a friend stopped by her house to see if anything was wrong. And what she found chilled her to the bone.
The initial caller had said that there was some type of disturbance that had happened at the residence.
I went up the stairs, went past her 2 golden retrievers who were sleeping in the living room, went through her bedroom. When I reached the top of the stairs, I could hear water running.
A hairdryer lay submerged in the bathtub. The bathtub full to the brim, and Angela was lying in the tub, dead.
I got the water turned off, and I saw her. She had only a t-shirt kind of on the top.
Angela Spence Shaw would not be going to work that day or ever again.
She had 2 just gigantic black eyes. Her lip was split. She had blood on her shirt.
The rest of the day's events were a blur. A frantic call to 911, uniformed police officers responding to the house with detectives hot on their heels.
It was clearly evident that a brutal homicide had taken place at the residence of Angela Spence Shaw. There was evidence of severe blood loss and trauma in her bedroom.
There was blood throughout the bedroom area where the victim was found. There was blood on her nightgown. Looked like blood splatter that was on the wall. The bed linens were actually missing. One of the pillowcases was missing.
The crime scene was a nightmare.
There was clearly evidence of blood that had seeped through onto the mattress where Angela slept, and that the room was in disarray. And there was evidence of her being dragged into the bathroom area and placed into the tub.
For Detective Sid Wardell, the case hit close to home. He was born and raised in this small town of 3,500 people.
So I did personally know the victim, just a friendly lady. She would certainly say hello to you if she saw you.
What happened in this house? Who attacked Angela Spence Shaw and why?
This is a beautiful seaside community, really very little or no crime. And why would anyone target this 66-year-old woman who was just living a nice, peaceful life? That just made no sense.
What were your initial thoughts about this case?
It certainly didn't look like that it was any type of a robbery. There was some jewelry and money on a bureau in her bedroom. The rest of the house was not ransacked in any way.
Meanwhile, the medical examiner retrieved the body for an autopsy, and the police went over the crime scene inch by inch.
It's like the CSI type detectives that go in and will process that scene. And I believe they spent at least 3 hours combing through the room, the bedroom, trying to come up with evidence.
Because the house was partly obscured from the street, whoever broke in could have come and gone without being seen.
The house was fairly secluded, although there were some houses around it. Her house was set back off the road. There was shrubbery that surrounded it from, or protected it from the roadside that was quite high.
It would have been easy, too easy, to break in.
So, how did the attacker get in the house?
What was also abundantly clear to us was that there was no way to secure the residence, that there was ongoing construction on her home, that the local contractors working on the home had just recently broken through a doorway area that could not be secured.
In addition to the two men who were renovating the house, possible suspects included, well, just about anyone.
Who else would have been in or around that property? I mean, it's the garbage collectors, neighbors, people that had past criminal histories, any sex offenders, people along that lines.
As the hours ticked by, law enforcement pieced together a clearer picture of what happened in the two-bedroom cottage. Angela Spence Shaw, fast asleep in her bed, had been bludgeoned and drowned by an unknown assailant.
The initial information we had, we believe Angela's time of death was sometime maybe around 10 p.m. that night.
And buckle up. The investigation into Angela's murder is about to take a darker and even more horrifying turn.
He apparently got into the back seat of a car of a woman and attempted to carjack the car.
A quiet life, working occasionally at a nursery, and spending time with her family was all that Angela Spence Shaw wanted.
This was an incredibly gentle, kind grandmother in her mid to late 60s, living by herself in a very idyllic community, and she was brutally raped and murdered.
A high-speed police investigation kicked off with an evidence collection and an autopsy. This was a mystery that needed to be solved as soon as possible before someone else in this community met the same fate.
You had, on any varying day, 10 to 25 state police detectives in Little Compton actively working this case.
The legwork included dialing the clock back to see if previous crimes and the people who committed them might be related to the murder of Angela Spence Shaw. There had been a killing decades in the past, and the killer was back in town.
The court actually imposed, as a part of their eventual parole, could never come back to the town of Little Compton.
Stanley Gendreau, the 22-year-old son of a local housekeeper, kidnapped a teenage girl and beat her to death.
The individual that had committed the murder had been infatuated with her, tried to get her to leave the house that evening. She put up a struggle, and he actually hit her over the head with a rock and left her to die. We found out the family lived close by. We ended up talking to the family, and ironically, that individual had also been visiting his family a couple of days prior.
While attempting to locate Stanley Gendreau, investigators took a closer look at the home of Angela Spence Shaw. Her renovation project involved creating a hole in an exterior wall, a new doorway, carved out just 2 days before she was bludgeoned to death.
So in identifying construction workers and other workers, whether they were plumbers, electricians, and everyone else, we found two individuals that were the construction workers who were basically full-time workers at the address. And one of them was Jeremy Motika.
One of the workers had a good alibi and was no longer a suspect. The other contractor, Jeremy Motika, also had an alibi, but could he prove his?
When you interviewed Jeremy Motika, he said he had been out of town.
He had informed us that he had just returned from Falmouth. His then girlfriend's family, I believe, owned a home.
Regarding the night of the murder, what did Motika tell you?
He had stated to us that he had been home, he had been drinking that night, had been drinking with friends. He indicated to us that he was so intoxicated that there was no way he could have driven anywhere. He used neighbors that were underage and said he was drinking with them, smoking some marijuana.
Did you feel like he was telling the truth in the interview?
You would expect people to be maybe sweating or shaking or voice cracking. There was nothing, none of those signs that raised any suspicions with me, at least, that this person wasn't telling the truth during those initial conversations.
The alibi appeared to check out, but Jeremy's story of drinking himself into a stupor took a direct hit when police tried to verify, believe it or not, whether he had ordered a pizza.
That's where his story started to unravel. He had said that he had had a pizza delivered that night. We went to the location that he had gotten the pizza from, and we had found out that the pizza was delivered the night before. Easily could have been a mistake, but certainly raises a little bit of a flag.
What about other people in their interviews? Did you feel like there were some shaky stories there?
When we had talked to the neighbors, again, underage, their story didn't completely match with him. He had said that he had been with them past midnight. They actually said that they had left his presence earlier in the evening.
Motika was a carpenter by trade, a hard-drinking 23-year-old by day, and possibly a murderer by night. He also, as it turned out, had a criminal record. One example, a weird incident a few years prior in Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
An individual, a female, had gone to her car, and when she went to drive away, Jeremy popped up in the back seat of the car. He was intoxicated. He said that he had gotten into the wrong vehicle. She felt that he was there with some intent to do something. However, she called the police. The story sort of got explained away.
Since Angela Spence Shaw had been found in her bathroom, the police wanted to know how many of their suspects were familiar with that part of the house.
And we asked them, had you ever used the bathroom where the victim had been located?
And what did Jeremy tell you?
In fact, he said he did. He had also said that he had washed himself up in that bathroom.
That sounds a little bit strange. I'm sure it did to you, too. A construction worker going into a house, up to the bedroom on the second floor to use the sink.
We had asked the contractor, workers and others, did they ever use the bathroom inside? Everybody said no. I think there was a porta potty type thing on the premise.
So given these additional details, did Motika's story ever feel genuine?
It all seemed to kind of mesh, the timing, and there was nothing really seemingly suspicious about the way he was behaving.
Once again, Jeremy Motika had evaded the police in the interview room. Maybe he was innocent. The case was not gelling, and the detectives were stumped.
Then the medical examiner jumped in with a critical new piece of information.
Through that autopsy, we learned that she had been sexually assaulted and the perpetrator had left seminal fluid on her body.
So was this the break that police needed to zero in on Angela's killer? The residents of Little Compton needed an answer soon before one of them became the next victim.
I think everybody was fearful. I'm sure they were all locking their doors and doing what they could to protect themselves because this was so random and so out of character for that town.
Who killed Angela Spence Shaw and why? The brutal murder of this beloved grandmother was proving to be a tough case for the police.
We had no clear suspects identified within the first 3 to 4 days. By day 5, 6, you're expanding beyond sort of that local tie to this.
Remember Sidney Gendreau, who had kidnapped and murdered a teenage girl years before? Well, law enforcement finally caught up with him.
It took us a day or so to locate him. He actually found out that we were looking for him, and he turned himself in to us.
Fortunately, pursuing the Gendreau angle turned out to be a dead end.
We conducted a full interview with him. He had a full alibi. I believe that next day we actually had confirmed that alibi, and he no longer was a suspect in our case.
So now what? Nothing else was panning out, and law enforcement was running out of time. Then the medical examiner's office checked in and pointed the case in a new direction, DNA evidence indicating the victim had been raped by her assailant.
The medical examiner had actually recovered DNA, discovered semen within the body of the victim, and that was our number one piece of evidence that we were going to be able to use going forward.
And what was your next move?
Since we had this seminal fluid with a DNA profile, that perhaps we should approach all the people that we knew had access to that home and see if they would consent to a blood draw to match the DNA.
30 people were asked to provide blood for testing, and all 30 said yes, including Jeremy Motyka. The lab ran its analysis and revealed that Motyka's DNA matched that found in the victim's body. For law enforcement, the path forward was clear. It was time to arrest Jeremy Motyka.
I was actually the one that put the handcuffs on him. We placed him in the back of the cruiser. I rode in the back with him. I think one of the telling things at that point with us, he never asked why. He never denied anything. He just went along with us.
It had been 25 days since the murder, and the events of that bloody night were lining up. Jeremy Motyka had crept into the home of Angela Spence Shaw, surprised her in her sleep, raped her, beat her into submission, drowned her in the bathtub, and dumped an electric hairdryer into the water just to make sure she was dead.
And I understand that actually, instead of admitting to what he had done, he began spinning wild stories to try and throw you off.
It's almost beyond belief that there was zero reaction emotionally, just telling this wild version of rinsing his genitals off in her shower.
So what else did he try and sell you on?
He was set up some crazy story about how one of my colleagues had obtained his semen at St. Anne's Hospital by giving him a Playboy magazine and asking him to masturbate in the backseat of the car.
A second DNA test confirmed that there was a 1 in 8.9 billion chance that he wasn't the killer.
Jeremy Motyka was now behind bars, but justice for the victim took another 2 years. Motyka was found guilty of first-degree murder and first-degree sexual assault. The sentence? Life without parole in a maximum security prison.
He never accepted any of the blame or any of the acts that were committed there, the assault, the murder, anything.
DNA evidence proved crucial in a police investigation. With the killer finally in prison, the people of Little Compton could finally breathe again. It has been many years, but the killing of Angela Spence Shaw still haunts this lovely Rhode Island neighborhood.
For Angela's family, friends, and neighbors, the chilling memory of her death is anything but distant. Angela Spence Shaw's story is one about vulnerability. Her house was being renovated and was left open to attack. If you need to stay in your home during renovations, you may need to take additional precautions. Make certain the contractor securely board up temporary openings to prevent unauthorized access. Avoid giving contractors keys or alarm codes. Ensure that exterior lighting is functional and well placed to deter potential intruders. Ideally, stay with a friend or family member or at a hotel until the home renovations are finished and your home is properly secured. Inform trusted neighbors about the renovation work and ask them to keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. Your home should be your safe space, so it's important to fortify it from potential danger.
My friend is staying with me, and there's blood everywhere.
What was your reaction to hearing those gunshots?
This was something very personal. They were there for one reason, and that was to kill Mariah Wilson.
Everybody loved her. She was this absolutely incredible cyclist that was gonna probably go really far.
Did the evidence give detectives some kind of direction?
She met up with a colleague, somebody that she rides bikes with.
He starts shaking his head back and forth, and his very first statement after that was, "I knew I shouldn't have bought that gun."
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to Austin, Texas, a city known for being a vibrant college town with a thriving music scene. But in one sad moment, it became the backdrop for the tragic murder of a renowned young cyclist. Following a trail of promising clues, police set out to find their suspect.
It was 9:54 p.m. on a warm May the 11th night in East Austin when a panicked woman called 911 from her home.
Austin 911.
My friend is staying with me, and I just walked in, and she's laying on the bathroom floor, and there's blood everywhere, and she's not breathing.
Paramedics raced to the scene, but there was nothing they could do to save the victim. 26-year-old Anna Moriah Wilson was pronounced deceased at the scene.
What injuries did she have?
2 gunshot wounds to her head, 1 to her chest. She was laying flat on her back in the bathroom.
So were there any obvious signs of struggle?
Nothing was knocked over, nothing was out of place. There wasn't a physical altercation that occurred inside prior to this murder happening.
There were no signs of forced entry either.
We later determined that there's a key code to get into that door, and we discovered it was not locked whenever she was in there.
So did the evidence give detectives some kind of direction?
There was a lot of directions that it could go at that point. We didn't know if it was a home invasion, if it was a burglary, robbery type situation that went bad, or if there was something else going on.
Shell casings and bullet damage indicated the first 2 rounds may have been fired as Moriah attempted to run into the bathroom. Another significant clue was found once Moriah was removed from the scene by the medical examiner.
We discovered that there was a broken tile in the bathroom floor, and it lined up directly where the gunshot wound on her chest was.
It meant the 3rd shot had been fired at point-blank range.
The suspect stood over her and fired 1 final shot into her chest, making sure that she was dead. That told me that this was something very personal. They were there for one reason, and that was to kill Moriah Wilson.
Investigators learned Moriah was a competitive cyclist, and she was visiting town for a race that weekend. But her bicycle was nowhere to be found.
It really kind of seemed to me that the reason that the bike was the only thing stolen from that apartment was because it was a personal thing. The killing itself was personal.
Through tears, Moriah's friend told police she had left her home at 5:30 that evening to have dinner, while Moriah had made her own plans.
Her friend had told us that she met up with a colleague, somebody that she rides bikes with, a friend named Colin Strickland.
So after her friend told you that, did Strickland become a person of interest?
Yes, so because Colin was the last person that we believed had seen her, he was definitely somebody we wanted to start with to talk to.
Investigators tried piecing together Moriah's timeline and learned she had returned to her friend's house shortly before police were called to the scene.
She had a door lock that would send her notifications whenever a code was used to unlock the door.
Moriah's friend received a notification at 8:36 indicating Moriah had come back to the apartment about an hour before 911 was called to the scene.
So was there anybody in the area who had heard or even seen something suspicious during that time?
Luckily, detectives were able to locate a neighbor that was close by that had Ring video footage.
In the video, a black-colored Jeep is seen driving slowly through the alley at 8:37 p.m., a minute after Moriah enters the home.
Unfortunately, it did have a rather large bike rack that was on the back of this Jeep, and it covered the license plate. There was really no light in the area, so we couldn't see into the vehicle to see who was actually driving that car at that time.
What exactly was suspicious about the car? Was it the time that it drove through the alley?
Yeah, so as it was pulling through the alleyway, it was starting to stop, and that specific location is right next to the residence where Moriah was staying. The time frame was also really interesting. It was shortly after she had just been dropped off, and it was within the window of when we believe the murder had taken place.
Police obtained more evidence from another home in the area, a chilling clip of surveillance video that made the timing of the Jeep's slow crawl ominous.
All of a sudden, I hear a scream, just a very, hey, I am scared to death scream. And then I hear 2 gunshots, a 6-second pause, and a 3rd gunshot. And then there's no more sound, it's just quiet.
What was your reaction to hearing those gunshots and the scream?
That indicated to me, I know for a fact when my murder happened. I have the audio. It happened at 9:15 p.m.
She passed away. Is being investigated as a homicide.
He is a suspect at this point. I'm very interested in him.
While investigators continued to process the murder scene of Moriah Wilson, they attempted to contact Colin Strickland, Moriah's friend, and possibly the last person to see her alive.
We ended up assigning some officers from our tactical intel unit. They ended up calling me and said, hey, there's a black Jeep in the driveway. It looks a lot like the one that's on the video.
The Jeep had a large bike rack, a similar luggage rack on top, and chrome around the windows.
Everything was lining up. Colin and Moriah had gone out. What didn't make sense to me was the direction of travel. Why was it traveling back towards Moriah's apartment at 8:37 if Moriah had already been dropped off at 8:36?
While detectives believed the Jeep was involved in the crime, they weren't sure who was driving it.
We don't definitely know that Colin is the one behind the wheel. So I came up with this plan of deciding to go to Colin's house and make it more of a death notification and see what his reaction was.
Detective Spittler drove to Colin's home, 7 miles southeast of the crime scene, to put his plan into motion.
There's really no easy way to say this, sir. So apparently last night she passed away.
How did that?
Right now it's an open investigation, but it is being investigated as a homicide.
The 35-year-old cyclist seemed lost in his thoughts. Detective Spittler remained suspicious of Colin as he observed him standing in front of the telltale Jeep from the video.
I'm definitely thinking he is a suspect at this point. I'm very interested in him.
Detective Spittler began asking Colin about his evening.
He said that he did pick up Moriah on his white motorcycle that was also parked in the driveway. They went swimming. They ended up walking to a restaurant, and then he drove her back home on his motorcycle, and then he left on his motorcycle.
And did you believe what he was saying?
I felt like he was mentioning his motorcycle quite often, not in the Jeep, that his motorcycle was parked right next to in the driveway. I'm telling myself, okay, you're lying to me because I have you on video in this Jeep.
Before leaving Colin's home, Detective Spittler could see through a small garage door window into his home and saw a woman.
The other detective asked, is that your girlfriend? He said, yeah, it is. Does she know that you were out with Moriah last night? And he said, no. We assured him, look, we're not here to cause any issues, but we do need to know the truth.
Colin agreed to answer more questions at police headquarters for the next several hours.
While I'm giving this interview, I have officers that are out that are trying to corroborate his story.
What did Colin tell you that he and Moriah had done that evening, and were you able to confirm that?
He told us that he ended up going to Pool Burger. So officers go to Pool Burger, and sure enough, they were able to find video at Pool Burger of them sitting down and eating.
Investigators found more video of a man and a woman riding a white motorcycle that resembled Colin's.
It showed them driving on his motorcycle and driving back to the apartment. And later on, we were able to locate some video also that showed him leaving that area in the same time frame.
The video seemed to back up Colin's account, but it left Detective Spittler with a burning question. If Colin weren't the one driving the black Jeep that night, who was?
said, well, what about that black Jeep? Who drives the black Jeep? He said, well, that's my girlfriend's car. That's Caitlin Armstrong's car.
35-year-old Caitlin Armstrong was a yoga instructor and a realtor, and Colin's live-in girlfriend of 2.5 years.
Sometime in October, they had broken up, and he actually started a relationship with Mariah. And that relationship was brief, probably about a week long, give or take.
Colin reconciled with his girlfriend Caitlin and remained friends with Mariah, but the friendship became a sore issue for the couple.
He held Mariah on a pedestal. He said she was one of the best cyclists in the U.S.
Detective Spittler decided to confront Colin about his girlfriend's black Jeep.
I ended up breaking the news to Colin, said, hey, Caitlin's car is seen on camera outside of Mariah's apartment. He was shocked. He ended up putting his face into his hands. He started shaking his head back and forth. And his very first statement after that was, I knew I shouldn't have bought that gun.
It sounds like maybe he went out with this girl the other day. And maybe it sounds like from what he's saying that you were a little upset about it.
As investigators learned more about Caitlin Armstrong from her boyfriend Colin, the focus of the investigation began shifting in an entirely new direction.
What else did Colin tell you about buying a gun?
We learned he had purchased 2 handguns, one for himself and one for her. And he told us the guns were 9mm handguns. The caliber that was used in the murder was a 9mm.
So did Caitlin become a focus of the investigation at that point?
At that point, we were realizing, okay, Caitlin now has the motive. There is the means. She's got the weapons in the house. So that was kind of the turning point of, okay, we need to actually really look at her at this point.
Austin police were able to arrest Armstrong at her home on an outstanding unrelated warrant and questioned her at police headquarters. But before the interview could begin, Detective Connor was informed the arrest warrant was invalid.
Apparently that warrant, the date of birth was wrong. You're not under arrest, okay?
Detective Connor tried to keep her engaged.
Did you hear about what's happened over the past 24 hours?
Colin walked in the house and said one of the women in the cycling community passed away.
Yes. It sounds like maybe he went out with this girl the other day. And maybe it sounds like from what he's saying that you were a little upset about it. I want to make sure that's not the case.
That is not accurate.
Your vehicle was seen next to her house. I want to be able to explain, okay, there's a logical explanation for this.
Whenever I confronted her about her vehicle being in the area, she kind of nods in agreement. There was no denials.
Is there any explanation as far as why the vehicle would be over there?
I would like to leave. I'm free to leave.
There was no emotion. She had almost this cold, just deep stare that just goes right through you.
Investigators obtained a search warrant for Colin's home and located the 2 guns.
Both of them were 9mm handguns. So we ended up taking both of them to test. And the gun that belonged to Caitlin was identified as a handgun that was highly likely to have been used in the murder and be connected to those shell cartridges.
So now I know that this gun found inside of Colin's house was used to murder Mariah Wilson. I know where Colin was, and I have him on video, but Caitlin, she also had access to it. We don't know where she was. So I wrote the arrest warrant for Caitlin based off of that information.
Colin was cleared in Mariah's murder, but when police went to arrest his girlfriend, Caitlin Armstrong, a few days later, she was nowhere to be found.
Her social media had been shut down. She wasn't answering phone calls. Colin hadn't even reached her. So we had no idea where she was at.
Investigators soon learned she had sold her black Jeep Grand Cherokee for $12,200 and skipped town.
We discovered that she had taken a flight from Austin up to New York to visit her sister.
But when Armstrong's unsuspecting sister was questioned, she told investigators that Caitlin was already gone and heading back home to Austin.
We couldn't figure out where she was, and so we started looking at the sister's name because they did look very similar. And that was when we discovered, okay, a flight had been booked under the sister's name.
Armstrong had evaded law enforcement again and flown to San Jose, Costa Rica.
They sent U.S. Marshals over to Costa Rica to actually get on the ground and start looking for her. They were able to narrow it down to an area that they believe she was in.
But it wasn't easy to find her. The 35-year-old yoga instructor had changed her appearance.
She had cut her hair, she had dyed her hair brown, and she had a bandage on her nose where it appeared she actually had nose surgery as well.
It took U.S. Marshals 43 days to locate her in a tiny town called Santa Teresa.
Once they were able to get close to her, they were able to immediately recognize, okay, this is her.
She told the marshals her name was Ari Martin, but she eventually revealed her identity before being extradited back to the U.S.
They brought her back to Houston, and I actually went down to Houston to try to re-interview her.
But Armstrong would not cooperate and lawyered up.
So did Caitlin ever even acknowledge her role in the crime or show any remorse?
At no point did she ever take any responsibility, and she never showed any remorse.
Investigators built a strong case against Armstrong.
We located Mariah's bike down the road, and it ended up having DNA on it that came back to Caitlin Armstrong.
Navigational data from her recovered Jeep showed her circling around the crime scene just before the murder, and it plotted her route back home before pulling into her driveway at around 9:48 p.m.
Was there ever any doubt in your mind that Caitlin Armstrong was guilty of murder?
Absolutely not. We actually had a lot of evidence in this case.
Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Caitlin Armstrong pled not guilty to first-degree felony murder. Jurors during her trial felt otherwise, and in November of that year, she was found guilty and sentenced to 90 years in prison for Mariah Wilson's murder. And now, it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. Mariah Wilson's future as a competitive cyclist looked bright until her life was tragically cut short by a vengeful murder. Now, while you can't make sure you're 100% safe all the time, here are a few tips that could help minimize your risk. Consider enhancing the lighting in and around your home for greater awareness and visibility. Install motion-activated lights around entry points and driveways, and use timers on your indoor lights to create the illusion that someone is there even when you're not. These are just a few smart choices to help save your life.